Hello and welcome. Today we'll be talking about acrobatic mutators. Acrobatic mutators are ones that require players to adjust their playstyles. So without further ado, let's get started. First we have Diffusion. So for Diffusion, you want to use units with range greater than 5 so that your units don't get hurt. That means for Raynor, you use tanks, banshees, and PCs. For Kerrigan, you will use Kinetic Blast, P3, and you should maximize your immobilization wave and use Brute Lords. If you're using P2, then you will have to hit your own Omega Worms and then shock them. That's probably better than jumping in, and you'll probably want a lot of extra queens for the healing. For Artanis, you make Tempests and Dragoons because they have long range. Swan can use Static Defense because they have a lot of HP, or you can use Wraiths and just move and hit while moving. You can also use a Factory Fleet because the Factory also has a lot of HP. Zagara uses Hunter Killers and Bow Launchers, Static D. You probably won't be making Lings because they'll just kill themselves. For Vorazun, you used Shadow Fury. Since Shadow Fury is like a spell, you use it and then blink away. And for sustained damage, you want to use Void Rays. This is probably one of the few times where Void Rays are actually needed. For Karax, you use your Static Defense and Top Bar. If you have to use units, then you can use Immortals and Colossi. For Abathur, you want Leviathans and Guardians, or you can use lots of Swarm Hosts, although it may take some time for things to die. For Alarak, you want to use Wrathwalkers and Ascendants, so it's pretty much the same thing, except you're going to rely more on the Wrathwalkers because they deal a lot of damage, less on Alarak himself. Nova uses Liberators, kind of just the usual. Stukov uses P1 stuff, so tanks and Diamondbacks. If you use P3, you should definitely add tanks anyways, but the Infested will get killed by Diffusion, so you probably won't be dealing a lot of damage with P3. For Phoenix, you'll rely more on Immortals and Colossi. Caldalis will have to take a back seat. For Dehaka, you want to use Creeper Hosts, and you can use a lot of Primal Worms and Greater Primal Worms. Han and Horner will use Hellions and BCs. You probably won't upgrade the Carrier Gallon upgrades because the little Interceptors will just get killed. For Tychus, you'll use a lot of Sirius and Sam. Tychus can still do damage with his grenade, but Sirius and Sam will be doing more of the damage. Zeratul will be using a lot of cannons, and you'll probably need Ambushers and Enforcers against air. For Stetman, you just use Super Gary, of course, and you can mass Infestors because they are expendable units. Manx will just use a lot of ESOs and bunkers. For Double Edge, you'll have to change your playstyle in order to avoid your units from killing themselves. You can get +1 upgrade, maybe +2 depending who you are, but you shouldn't get +3 weapons because the extra damage might just be enough to get yourself killed. For Raynor, you can use Marines, Bunkers, and Mines to avoid getting yourself killed. Kerrigan can use Immobilization Wave. Depending on where you use it, you might die, you might not die. So it's kind of weird. It's hard to say whether or not she'll die to it. And you can use Brute Lords and Zerglings. For Artanis, you want to use Dragoons and get the Shield Regen upgrade ASAP because that actually heals his Dragoons. So in a way, it's kind of a buff once you get the Shield Regen upgrade. For Swan, you'll need to keep like 6 to 8 SCVs around the drill. If possible, you should use P1, but if you're using P0 or P2 or P3, the top bars will get him the drill killed, so you want to make sure that you won't be needing it for a while. For Zagara, you'll be using Banes and Scourge, and don't Baneling Barrage buildings because that will get Zagara killed. If you Baneling Barrage units, that's fine. For Vorazun, you use Shadow Fury and then blink back. You can use Stalkers because they don't deal enough damage. Corsairs are kind of okay as well, although if you use a Black Hole, you might die because the Corsairs will start to deal tons of damage to so many units at once. For Karax, you'll be using Cannons and Top Bars. Monoliths will deal a lot of damage, so they'll get themselves killed. Carriers are fine, so you can use that. Abathur, Mass Swarm Hosts. You want to be careful with Brutalists and Leviathans. Your Symbiotes will be fine, but you don't want to regular attack too much. Full Biomass Ravagers will also be very good because they can heal themselves with Double Edged. For Alarak, the hero unit becomes a one-use top bar unless you're really good at like using Destructive Wave and then putting him in a prism immediately. You can also mass Slayers and use Structure Overcharge. You can also mass Destroyers, but the Mothership should not be attacking too much or else the Mothership will die. So it's just a lot of Destroyers. Alarak himself, if he's against Zerg, he can just kill all the Lings and then just die. But make sure that he's by himself so he doesn't take your whole army with you. For Nova, you want to use the mines from the tanks and sabotage drone, as well as Raven turrets. You don't want to use Seeker Missile because the Seeker Missiles will get the Ravens killed. You can use Marines, Banshees, and airstrikes. If you use the nuke, you want to lift yourself before the nuke lands so that you don't get yourself killed. Liberators will get themselves killed because they deal too much damage. For Stukov, you want to use tanks, liberators, and infested units. So P3 is really good against double-edged. Tanks, as long as they don't deal the regular attack, as long as they're throwing volatile infested, they'll be fine. For Phoenix, you'll make carriers and adepts. Caldalis, you can use him as well, but he'll get himself killed a lot. He'll just be a mineral dump. For Dehaka, you use creeper hosts and pack leaders, so pretty much the normal thing. Han and Horner, you want to use Reapers and Carrier Galleons. Strike Fighters will get themselves killed, so they will have a longer CD, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't use them. You should still make them. For Tychus, you want to throw grenades with Sam and Tychus, or launch the Odin nuke and then pick them up with medevac. Make sure that Sam's grenades explode before you drop them down again. For Sirius, you want to turn off his own anti-air, that the rockets, the autocast on those. You want to use the Sirius turrets to deal tons of damage because they're expendable. Vega can mind control a lot of units as well. For non-P2, you should open with Nikara, one of the rare times, because Nikara's healing is really good, better than Rattlesnake's. Rattlesnake can use a healing stick with Odin. For Zeratul, you want to make ambushers and shield guards. You want to rely on the ambushers blink, that little ball, to deal the damage. You don't have to worry about shield guards because they won't deal that much damage. Plus, they'll be giving your ambushers heals. You can also make cannons and project them, but they'll get themselves killed. Zeratul gets a free spin every 5 seconds, so you should blink in, spin, blink out. I don't recommend using P2 with double edge because the ambushers' regular attacks will start dealing a ton of damage to themselves after 6 to 7 fragments. Whereas if you're using P0, you can still use the blink and then attack regularly like once or twice. For Stetman, you want to use Lings and Infestors. Do not use Igor. You can use Green Zone and overcharge the Statolite to give himself a shield, and you can use the regular attack, but if you use an Igor, you might get yourself killed. For Manx, his bunkers are immune to double edge, and you can also use P3 troopers as Banelings, but you won't be able to use ESOs. Next, Eminent Domain. If Amon takes a building that can produce units, he will make units, so don't let Amon take those kinds of buildings. Protoss buildings, however, don't do anything until Amon also gets a pylon. This matters more often when there's something that hits a lot of buildings at once, like going nuclear. Amon doesn't land flying buildings, so if your building is about to die, you can actually lift it off. And you can't wall Amon off with Eminent Domain, because if there's a building in his path, it will just not get taken over. However, you can reduce the space, so you can kind of make a choke for him. So if you can normally fit like 3 buildings, 2 of those 3 might get taken over, and they all get stuck and they have to go through one path. So it'll slow him down a bit. This is very apparent in burning evacuation on minor evacuation, where your buildings will turn to Amons, but then you're actually going to block him off and they only have one path to reach the ship, which is actually helpful for you. Note, for Raynor, his Hyperion's PDDs can get taken, so make sure that you don't use them in a place that can affect you. Omega Worms don't get taken, so that's good. For Artanis, Alarak, and Phoenix, nothing much happens because they don't really have anything special. For Swan, with enough towers, Eminent Domain doesn't matter because your blaster abilities will just kill whatever he takes. Amon can take Zagara's bow launchers but doesn't use them. Dark pylons that are taken will cloak Amon's units, so be careful. For Karax, if Amon doesn't get a pylon, his stolen cannons and batteries won't do anything. For Abathur, you should try not to lose the spore you use for luring, but if you do, it's not a big deal, especially if it's uprooted. For Nova, defense drones and Raven turrets can get taken, so be careful about where you put them. Make sure you get the Liberator's attack buildings upgrade so you can take care of any turrets that Amon gets. For Stukov, make sure your bunkers don't get taken. You may even want to get the region or armor upgrades. For Dehaka, try not to place Primal Worms in bad places, because if Amon takes them, then you're going to be in some trouble. For Han and Horner, their galleons become invincible, so that's a buff. For now, at least, they're broken when there's Eminent Domain. For Tychus, serious turrets and rattlesnake healing stations can get taken, so be careful. For Zeratul, cannon projections can get taken, but they'll disappear, and you should cancel the projections before they die to avoid this. However, Amon doesn't get the actual cannon, and the projection is pretty weak, so you can probably just kill it with Zeratul if it's in the way. Stetman's Statolites have a 50% chance of getting destroyed, so if you're not P1, you may lose some Statolites. Instead of being deactivated, they'll be gone. However, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't use P2 Gary because he's still good. And for Manx, Eminent Domain kind of matters to him because the units in the bunkers get taken as well, so you should unload a bunker before it goes down. Laser Drill. The Laser Drill DPS increases from 20 to 60 over time. You can notice the increase in damage when the beam turns brighter red. The respawn time is 2 minutes if it is destroyed, and you should try to camp it with static D after destroying it. When you're fighting Zerg, you want to clear creep tumors because creep tumors will give the laser drill vision. This is especially noticeable in Mal Warfare in the right natural, where a creep tumor will be spread to that base pretty early on. In Chain of Ascension, Janara or the opponent, Amon's champion, provides vision for the laser, so if you fight in the center, you're going to get shot. In Minor Evacuation, the laser and the infested are different factions. So the infested actually don't give vision to the laser. That's kind of a good thing for you. Only Amon's units and his observers and stuff, the attack waves will give vision. For Part and Parcel and Dead of Night, the laser is actually not very far, so it's easy to kill. And for Missed Opportunities, Mal Warfare, and Temple of the Past, the laser can hit the objective. Make sure that they don't see those things, or make sure that they're hitting something else and not the objective first. For Kerrigan, you can tank the laser with Omega Worms, and you can stall it for about like 40 to 50 seconds. For Swan, what you can do against Zerg, you can fly a factory and have 2 SCVs repairing it near a creep tumor. That way you can stall the drill forever, as long as you don't build detection near the creep tumor to spot it. For Abathur, you may need 2 spores or even 3 for luring because the drill is going to hurt them a lot. For Dahaka, the early game is rough, so make sure that you eat biological units to stay healthy. For We Move Unseen, you need to rush detection, especially on Rifts to Core Hall. And if you are using air unit detectors, you want to make other air units to tank any air-to-air units like Vikings and Phoenixes. If your only air unit is an Overseer, Phoenixes might just gang up on it and then you'll lose your detection and you won't be able to see anything. So you want to make other air units so that the detectors don't get hurt. For Raynor, you want to make extra OCs, so you want at least 3 more than usual. For Artanis, you want an extra Robo. And if you're using P3, you don't have Guardian Shell, so you really need to take care of your observers. For Stukov, you can use Queens. The symbiotes from the Queens will give extra vision and detection. For Dahaka, you want to prioritize tech, and you should be able to get a Primal Worm by around 3 minutes and 40 seconds. This means that you can even deal with speed props. And Power Overwhelming. So you should use Static Defense because it's less susceptible to spells. It's only susceptible to the Stasis Cocoon thing, and that's not that big. Oh, D-Webs as well, but those aren't as bad as the AoE spells to army units. The enemies cast a lot of AoE spells, so tanky units are better for taking those hits. For Raynor, you want to use lots of bunkers to keep your infantry safe, and you want to use BCs. Kerrigan, you will rely on the hero unit and you'll make ultras later on. For Artanis, Dragoons are good, Tempests are also good, but you want to spread them and use Unbound Fanatics on waves. For Swan, Static Defense will be good, and Factory Fleet is also nice because they aren't really affected. For Zagara, P2 Aberrations is a good strat because they will have extra life and they heal. If you are using P3, you can use P3 Aberrations plus the hero unit, and if you're defending, use a lot of Bio Launchers. For Vorazun, Time Stop doesn't stop the power overwhelming spells, so you might get caught in like a fungo or something while your Shadow Guards are trying to attack some stuff. For Karax, Static Defense and Ops. For Abathur, Ultimate Evolutions and Swarm Hosts, those will be very good for draining all the energy from the attack waves, while the Swarm Hosts, the Locusts, have so much life that they won't die. And there's so many of them. Alorak suffers against power overwhelming. Slayers are most resistant, but that doesn't mean that they're great. For Nova, her ghosts can EMP the enemies so that they stop casting spells. Otherwise, you want to use the usual Liberator Ravens. For Stukov, you can use P3 Infested and just overwhelm them. So you'll lose some stuff, but you'll have a lot more than they do. For Phoenix, P2 doesn't really care, so you just do whatever you usually do. The Haka, you want to use Creeper Host and Static Defense, the usual. For Han and Horner, Amon's PDDs can stop the Strike Fighters, which really sucks. And you want to use BCs and Hellbats. For BCs, you may even want to practice toggling between the Rapid Fire and the Yamato mode, so that you can get rid of PDDs. For Tychus, you want to use Sirius a lot because he throws out strong structures. Zeratul make cannons. For Stetman, you want Hydras to overpower PDDs, Corruptors for air, Ultras for ground. You can also spam Infestors and just make a lot of free units, so it's similar to Abathur. For Mex, his Emperor's Shadows can EMP the enemies, just like Nova's Ghosts. You want to use ESOs and kill them before they can even cast spells on you, and you want to use your bunkers and the top bar. And that's it for this lesson. Hope you learned something useful about acrobatic mutators. This is only part 1, so stay tuned for part 2. And like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. Comment down below about your experiences with these kinds of mutators and your personal strategies for how to deal with them. And while you're already here, why don't you check out this other guy, which is appearing on the screen soon. See you next time.